works. I have the pleasure to first guide you a little bit across the findings. I'm actually super ultra duper happy because it's the first time that I'm actually seeing this report printed out. So now the expectation is even going up because it has been digital for a very, very long time period. So from our perspective, I will guide you across a little bit the findings and the discussions that we had with the Insurtech companies during the last year. And as the report has been released in May, a little bit the differences and what has changed since May as well. I have asked some Insurtech companies to be in the room as well, so then I will ask them to raise their hands so you can have a little bit of discussions to see how life looks from their perspective. Just to start, the goal to launch the report was actually triggered by the former head of FinTech from the Swedish Financial Supervision. He stepped down and we had an exit interview. And then he said that one of the biggest challenges is actually that the insurance companies as well as the banks are not really listing their problems, so they really don't say where they need particular support. So it's very difficult for Insurtech companies or for FinTech companies to fill this particular gap. To say, okay, what are the challenges that you are having? Then let us just fix this particular gap. And Sweden, being the 7th country that I'm resident of, is one of the best countries to actually foster innovation because there's a low trust. There's a high amount of trust into the different tiers. It's very different to, for example, Germany when we work in the different hierarchies, so it's quite flat. We have all of the different components from a Stockholm perspective to have like the secret Stockholm sauce for cooperation. But according to Speak, we still waste it because we somehow cannot talk to each other and actually try to merge the different aspects of the ecosystem. On one side, the Insurtech companies, on the other side, the FinTech companies. Then just added up, coming back from one of the lunches with Insurtech companies, asking them how is actually the cooperation with insurance companies as such. And they said that similar to other Insurtech companies, when it comes to reinsurance, we just have to go somewhere else. So we don't really have a possibility to work with any kind of Swedish providers because they are just too conservative. The way how they have been calculating risk and using the risk methods has been very difficult for us to move forward, so we have to go to the UK, we have to go to Germany. I'll show you a couple of cases of those. Because that's a challenge for us from an ecosystem perspective, because once those companies will tend to more and more leave, then of course we might lose the competitive edge of being on front of innovation in this particular area. So I have been doing insurance for the last, Insurtech, so working with Insurtech for the last 3 years. I've been doing FinTech for the last 11 years. One of the companies I had to build has been sold to a bank. The other one has just done an IPO, I think now in quarter 2, 2019. And I think the most important for you guys are just 3 aspects. On one side, I'm a contributor to the Forbes magazine, actually working and covering Insurtech, blockchain, FinTech, as well as we had the pleasure together with Linda and Henrik to work on the report to actually go and map the different ecosystem to start with, okay, who is really out in the space. Similar to last year, we will be having there's a Stockholm FinTech Week. So it's actually a community-driven event where we had 110 speakers, 700 attendees for the entire week. We will be having an Insurtech track where we just purely focus on insurance for like half a day. And this last year has been the possibility for us to allow different players from the ecosystem to come together, because usually academics tend to come together in academical conferences. Practitioners are coming together either from an incumbent perspective or from an Insurtech perspective, and politicians are coming together more or less in the policy discussions. So the Stockholm FinTech Week is supposed to bring stuff together. And then we have discovered that there's a lack of discussions in the ecosystem. So then we have created a non-for-profit, which is called InnoBridge, where we have actually sessions where where we discuss different topics like AI or like blockchain behind closed doors and ask all of the questions. What is this really? To actually bridge the challenges that we have in the ecosystem. But let us just zoom into to first discuss what is going on and then to discuss a little bit the findings. There was the first report that I, together with seven other co-authors, we worked on. It was in 2017. where we basically tried to define what is Insurtech, what Insurtech is not. And then we realized that we don't really have even a definition of the word Insurtech. So it's innovation in insurance, but what is this really? To give you an example from a fintech word, when we started to define what fintech is, then suddenly a lot of the companies reached out saying, yeah, but I'm not covered in this report, but I'm printing cards, I'm printing debit and credit cards. Like, okay, maybe you're not really a fintech company, but then maybe you're a printing house. So this, I think, this shows you the complexity. So Insurtech is a little bit behind, so we don't really even have a clear definition of what Insurtech is. So I think the message is, whenever you will see different reports covering Insurtech in Stockholm, please don't trust them that strongly. Go to the methodology section and actually check that they differ by like 70 to 80%. You know, in terms of which type of investments have been collected within Insurtech. And in case you think, why is that? Because we don't have really a definition, and methodology is different. So we started with the next wave of fintech, and then, as mentioned, together with Linda, Henrik, and the Itello team, we had to start somewhere. So we decided to understand. Okay, let us check who is in the ecosystem. From a Nordic perspective, who is and what are those companies doing? Let's cluster them, because this will definitely give us an understanding in what direction the market is going. And then we just go from what, then to the, for example, Stockholm FinTech Week, where we discuss how to work together. But first we have to understand what is actually going on in the ecosystem. So you will have access to all of the slides, and then you can see that we have been able to divide the Insurtech companies into those different sectors. On one side we have personalization, distribution, customer engagement. We have on-demand insurance, and then we mapped 72 companies in the Nordics. The question is if 72 companies are many, or if they are few. In comparison, we have around 420 fintech companies. So suddenly fintech started to include Insurtech, sometimes it excludes Insurtech. And then, at least since the report has been launched, not 72, 73, because I have a colleague from Omacom that sits there in the back that has been missed in the report. So for example, the only way for us to review the different companies from an Insurtech perspective is actually to do something which is called desk research, to Google Insurtech Stockholm, to reach out to all of the different partners and ask them, who do you know? Because we don't even have a tag of Insurtech to Google for those particular companies. I think this shows you how early the market is as well, but nevertheless 73 companies are not 10. So we see that there is a progress. So when it comes to the division, of course, there is distribution, as mentioned, personalization, risk detection, claims management. When you see where the biggest amount of companies are, then of course it's in risk detection, and then we see that there are a large amount of players which are in the distribution angle. We have seen in other countries that there has been a on-demand insurance. So and there are a lot of different possibilities to have the on-demand insurance when you, for example, would like to go sailing or you would like to go somewhere in other countries that were not possible or that have not been available in Sweden. I think now with the colleagues with Omacom, we at least filled this particular gap. So because from this circle perspective, it has not really been interesting as well where companies are. It has been interesting where companies are not, because suddenly we have seen that we have gaps in this ecosystem. Focusing on you guys with the extensive experience that you have, the question is how many companies do we really have which are doing life insurance? Which are doing, which are in Insurtech space. But we know that when it comes to the complexity, that companies will, as the complexity increases, definitely more and more companies will come into this area. And of course, this is from a Nordic perspective. But when you take only Iceland, so suddenly we have only 2 companies. Of course, Iceland has a different population and everything else, but it's still it gives us some kind of understanding. Plus, the Insurtech founders are a little bit older than the fintech founders. When you think about the founders of Klarna or the founders of Itello, the age is 46.7. So when I look around the room a little bit today, so potentially a lot of you are good candidates to run your own Insurtech companies. And one of the explanations behind that, but there are more assumptions, so we don't know. So then there are the assumptions that we have been able to find as plausible, have been that when you would like to run a company similar to Itello, please don't quote me, then of course you have to just register with the financial supervision, and then you are a payment intermediary. In case you would like to run an insurance or Insurtech company, you need all of this knowledge from fintech, plus all of the knowledge from insurance. And then there is a misperception in the market that Insurtech founders are very, very young. They just finish handles and they just go and they're just creating like an Insurtech company. Of course, this is not the case. They need all of the experience that you have. Then you know what is working, what is not working. And based on that, you see what are the potential gaps in the ecosystem. And then this is where more or less you decide to fill those particular gaps with the different products that you are creating, because the complexity is way higher than expected. Speaking about reinsurance, when we think about the companies, of course, this is just an example of three, which made a decision once they started to launch their products. When it comes to the first layer of insurance, then we have reinsurance, then we have core systems. They actually go somewhere else when it comes to the risk calculation models. I will just give you an example about one of the companies in a second, but I think this is a good warning sign, potentially, for us in the ecosystem. This means once those companies decide to go somewhere else, there's a big likelihood that more and more of them will decide to go somewhere else, and then we don't want to lose this particular competitive edge. When it comes to the Insurtech's expectations, once they have been approaching us, I think speaking about the report, then they have all of these expectations where the ecosystem is supposed to be. So, of course, there are countries like Denmark that has a dedicated fintech hub which covers partly Insurtech. They have dedicated processes and systems. I just came back from Helsinki. There's a dedicated system from a public side to actually provide funding. So of course the Insurtech companies have all of this expectation how the ecosystem is supposed to look like. Unfortunately, we are not able to fulfill these expectations of today. So we are in a very, very preliminary stage. We don't have those systems in place. Furthermore, when we see on the amount of individuals who are actually running Insurtech companies from the Nordics as such, 95% of them are men. Still, I think it's interesting for us because we don't have a very gender diversified panel as of like discussions as of today. I think it's a good warning sign. And then from a Finnish, Icelandic, and Norwegian perspective, 100% of individuals who are running Insurtech companies are men as well. So then there's clearly something what we are not doing as we're supposed to be doing, and there has to be clear potentially some kind of a reason for it, which we don't really understand and we have not been able to cover in the report as such. So this is more or less how it started. When you think where the industry is going, then it's very important to keep in mind that we have this definition of disruption. So definition of disruption indicates when a market like the travel industry is supposed to be disrupted. So it comes from Christiansen and has been taken from the Oxford Blockchain Strategy program. So it's the disruption happens when companies are focusing a little bit on their own metrics. It happens when they ignore the needs of certain segments of the market, and it happens when they resist certain technologies to be implemented. And of course, then we have the add-ons. So we see the disruption as not a one occurrence, it's more or less an ongoing process, where small companies are, with fewer resources, are able to take on larger companies in the particular segments. And of course, this explains disruption in total, but very subjectively, I think it's reflecting on the development of the Insurtech companies in the Nordics. It seems that this matches the potential of disruption of the insurance industry as such quite strongly. Not as strong as from a banking side. When you think what banks have been doing during the last 5 to 6 years, they have implemented a lot of changes because there has been a PayPal, there has been a Klarna, there has been an Itello, the larger players. We don't really have a PayPal and insurance yet. Okay, we might have Lemonade and there's a little bit of headway, but they're not as strong. But potentially, as they might be coming, then the urge to change will be stronger. Nevertheless, we have those good examples. On one side, we have Fortinox and SPP when they started to work together when when Fortnox is offering a platform for small and medium enterprises and is actually allowing small and medium enterprises to use the services from SPP, we have Scandia and a possibility to actually invest into sustainable products. We have the possibility to actually zoom in from when we have the technological stacks. So in the beginning, this is the application layer. When a lot of the Insurtech companies take place, then we have free insurance and we have the different core system layer. So when you think it's like going top down, historically most of the Insurtech companies are still here, so that they are on the surface facing the customer. As mentioned, we have been now able to fill this particular gap with a company that is called Omocom, and what they do. And Kisa, I could just ask you to raise your hand, so then you're the colleague in the back. What they do, I think I will do my best to do a good summary in like 3 sentences, is for a long time period it was impossible for us to rent dolls to each other or to rent motorcycles to each other over the weekend. Even though you trust your other colleague, this was impossible to do because you never know what. So you had this fear who would be responsible in case this particular items would break. So then Omocom decided to fill this particular gap. So it's like an on-demand insurance that fits in or fills in the glue. So in the sharing, so in the circular economy between different individuals. And then when you think about Omocom's setup, so of course on one side we have the sharing economy in the platform, so then the application layer, and then insurance, and then we have reinsurance. But then suddenly, as they calculate a large amount of risk and take a significant amount of risk by themselves, suddenly they are a little bit the glue between the different layers. So we see that the traditional model, how this has been operating, how Insurtech companies have been working, is actually deteriorating. So then there is a modification in the business model and the business model innovation as such. So then the ecosystem starts to cluster together. Asking the Insurtech companies how well they think that the cooperation with incumbents looks like, 81% have actually specified that it doesn't work at all. So they have difficulties and they have challenges to work together with traditional providers. The main indication, we have collected 27 different challenges. The top 3 challenges that have been indicated is that they even have problems to understand to whom they're supposed to be reaching out from an insurance company perspective. When they would come and visit your websites, there's only barely Insurtech ads in the name of your company. So they tend to chase those different individuals on LinkedIn because they don't really know with whom they're supposed to be talking. And then of course there's a time aspect. Even though if there is a partnership model potential, if there's a potential for a partnership model, how long this will potentially take? What are then the steps? And then we have the black box processes when there is an ongoing discussion and more departments are asking the same questions. And selling a fintech company to a bank took around 4 years. I have heard that selling an Insurtech company to an insurance company is even 2 times to 3 times as long. To give you a little bit of perspective how this looks like. From a fintech perspective, when your runway is quite short. Speaking to incumbents, they have indicated 57 different problems. Why it is impossible for them to work together with insurance companies or with Insurtech companies. Of course, there's the software legacy is one. We cannot work together with you because we have those very complex systems. So there's we don't have the possibility to integrate you at all, and it's usually a blocker. Not all of the different corporations have to be done based on integration. I think in the report you will find at least four to six different setups where actually insurance companies have been able to supply a little bit of knowledge in order to launch products together. Then a lot of companies are confusing technology with solution. So we have those challenges where insurance companies are approaching AI experts and say, we have all of this data, we have to do AI. And then the individuals are like, but what's your question? What would you like to have answered? No, we have all of this data. Okay, you need a database. So it's more, I think, the replacing one technology with another technology, it will not resolve the problems as such. Then, of course, we have a proven development partners with, so once there is a cooperation, one development partner is a kind of challenging to work with anybody else. And then there's a challenge of working together with the ecosystem, because in case they usually tend to be projects within the insurance company, or usually to the bank. There is rather a discussion with, for example, consultants, and I think there's of course nothing against experts in this particular area, but as we have the 72 different other Insurtech companies, or we have 450 fintech companies, there is a possibility to actually reach out to the ecosystem saying, hey, I'm having this particular challenge, who can help us out with? And then the way to resolve that, I think we started with, okay, how to break those innovation walls with the benchmark reports on incumbents, bank, Insurtech corporations. Of course, this is just the start, because it doesn't really answer us all of the questions that need to be answered, as for example, what we're supposed to be doing in order to have more female founders, which support Insurtech companies supposed to be receiving from the public side, how the corporation is supposed to be facilitated from an incumbent Insurtech perspective. Furthermore, there was one idea that seems to pick up now, and is something which is called reverse coaching, where there is a possibility that Insurtech founders or executives in the area of Insurtech could actually be connected to traditional incumbents, because we are familiar with the idea of coaching, but usually the idea of coaching is more connected with, I have 150 years of experience and I will sit down with you and tell you how to run your business. There is a possibility to do reverse coaching, where actually companies that have been created 5 or 10 years or 5 years ago, that don't have the entire legacy systems, can actually sit down and say, okay, we do it in the following way, because we don't have, of course, this particular baggage of challenges. What do you think? So then the reverse coaching. And this is the part that I would strongly encourage you to do when you have those different Insurtech companies here in the report, and you have something that you really, really like. Please just internally consider if you would like to be joining them as a board advisor, for example. Because often they do need to have your expertise, and then you have this years of experience in the different sections of the insurance business that they would really, really profit from. But what happens in the ecosystem is they will not reach out to you because they don't know that you exist, and you usually don't reach out to them because there are those walls of innovation. So we have not been proactive. And of course, there are knowledge. There has to be an increased knowledge exchange between the different borders of innovation. As mentioned in non-for-profit, in InnoBridge, we decided to lock the door and have sessions with 20-25 different individuals who are actually working in the different industries, to ask, okay, well, how can I use blockchain? Really, I don't understand how this works. Everybody talks about this, but I just don't know. To have actually allow to have this particular exchange. And maybe this is not resolving all of the problems in the ecosystem, as they have not been defined yet, as we didn't have follow-up reports, but nevertheless, there are those particular steps that can be taken in order for us to make sure that the innovative Insurtech companies are not leading somewhere else, and that we keep the innovation within the local ecosystem. And it's easier for me as a researcher to speak for hours. And the summary in 20 minutes is every time a kind of a challenge, but I think in the last 20 minutes I gave my best to go across the different sections of what Insurtech, and so the different taxonomy of Insurtech. I think now you have heard at least about the 84 different challenges we have mapped. So yes, Insurtech is progressing. We see that that the insurance industry is set up to be disrupted. Maybe I have been too hyper optimistic. In the summary of this session, it says 2 to 3 years. Maybe it's not 2 to 3 years. Maybe it's 4 to 5. But in case we will not take any kind of actions as of today, the problem potentially will not go away. So then there are different experiences that we can, or the different solutions that we can a little bit copy from the fintech environment, as the banks have been a little bit further. So we have 84 mapped challenges. We know that due to the increased complexity of Insurtech, actually the founders are way older than expected. Nevertheless, we know that there are those difficulties for the Insurtech companies to receive any kind of public support and to have this knowledge transfer, which very strongly remains within the borders of innovation of our own entities. And then you will have access to the presentation, and then of course there's a link to this report electronically. There's a link to the fintech report where we I think covered fintech in 350 pages. Especially I'm the only person on earth who read this this entire report. But please have a look. Please review how this report can apply to you, and what can we do, what can you do in order to take those particular next steps. Because we need to take them. And coming back to the expectation of Insurtech companies, okay, there is this expectation our ecosystem is perfect and we get all the support and public support and funding. This is maybe not a castle yet, but we're definitely way further than when we started in 2017, when we had basically nothing, and we even didn't know without an ecosystem. And I think this is so far so good when it comes to those 22 minutes, as I'm a little bit over time. Thank you.